With every sudden plunge into sleep, time and I are sliced apart.
Amanda Gaddis, also known in the game as the Lanternist, is IdentityV's newest survivor. The entire community collectively lost their minds over this character and how she works. From solid personal kiting, perfectly timed pops on primed ciphers, and even things like delaying chair progress and delaying damage taken. Amanda released in Season 39 with the second essence, and like I said, has been causing a stir in the community due to how strong she seems. If what you've been hearing online about her sounds at all interesting to you, or maybe you're just looking to take up a new survivor domain, then listen up, grab a notepad, because this guide aims to teach you everything you need to know about Lanternist. Like I've said multiple times already, Amanda has kind of been a bit of a shock to the community. This is largely because when we all saw her showcase video, everyone agreed that she seemed way too strong for this current meta and was most certainly going to receive changes, but that wasn't the case. NetEase largely left her completely be this time around. Her actual abilities are what's really important here, but as always, let's go over some base stats. These are super easy to go over. She pretty much has the baseline stats for everything, from movement to pallets, healing, and everything else. But the one thing she does have changed is her decoding speed thanks to her trait All Thumbs, which decreases her decoding speed by 10%. Amanda's kit is overall decently flexible, letting her take up the role of kiter, assist, rescue, and even a pseudo decoder. But we can't understand how she can fill these roles without first understanding how her kit works. So let's jump right in. While her gameplay can feel tricky, she only really has two primary abilities to keep track of. Amanda's first ability is Living Image. With a charge maximum of 2, a recharge rate of 60 seconds, and a cooldown of 10 seconds, the Lanternist carries a projection lantern and can freeze frame survivors onto an optical slide. When freeze framing herself, she gains status projection and position projection for 10 seconds. When freeze framing a teammate, that teammate gains status projection for 8 seconds. Each teammate can be freeze framed no more than 2 times. If a survivor takes normal attack damage during the freeze time, the freeze frame ends early. Survivors can also end a freeze frame manually. If the Lanternist is within 20 meters of a rocket chair with a survivor on it, the freeze frame duration is reduced by 75%. The survivor's condition is freeze framed onto the optical slide. During the freeze frame, damage from non-normal attacks and strong effects will not take effect immediately, but will instead be applied instantly when the freeze frame ends. If a survivor takes damage during the freeze frame, any control effect is ignored. If they were affected by multiple control effects, only the most recent one applies when the freeze frame ends. When used on herself, the Lanternist's location is also freeze framed onto the optical slide. Upon activation, she leaves her body and moves in a disembodied state with 10% faster movement speed. She can freeze frame again from a new position, leaving a visible trail along the path. So a bit of a hefty ability description, but hey, welcome to 2025 IDV. We are past the days of 1 to 2 sentence kit descriptions. Anyways, while this literal paragraph seems daunting, we can understand it quite easily actually. First off, your use cases of it are either on yourself or on teammates. You never want to use it on yourself unless you're in chase. Think of it like a seer owl. Very important thing to note with this ability is it acts as a pseudo shield. It will not block normal attack damage, but any damage taken from abilities will be delayed. Think Naiad's Water, Robbie's Souls, Wax's Wax, or any of the chip damage hunters. The damage from all these sources will be delayed until the duration ends, which lets you time your flywheel perfectly to avoid the damage. Running flywheel with a Lanternist on your team will always 100% be a good idea. The other part to this shield is how it interacts with stuns. It works very similar to damage being delayed until the duration ends, but the important thing to note is how each stun interacts with each other. Let's use an example against Anne to understand this properly. We all know Anne's cats can enable some pretty hefty stun times, but what you might not know, especially if you're newer to the game, is that if you get stunned by Anne's first cat, then get stunned with the second one quickly after, the stun timer is much shorter. How does this relate to Amanda though? Well, it's simple. If you freeze yourself, then delay the first stun of the cat, you're doomed to suffer the long stun duration. But if you force the second cat as well, that stun overrides the longer stun, leading you to only suffering the shorter stun instead. This makes your use cases for this ability more niche than you might expect. It doesn't really do much of anything against characters who only depend on their normal attacks, though being able to move your static image when you freeze yourself can help you bait the basic attack since your static image is what takes the damage. Moving on to the next part of her kit, we have static projection. With a charge maximum of 2 and a recharge rate of 50 seconds, the Lanternist can freeze-frame cipher machines, rocket chairs, and the exit gate. While freeze-framed, survivors can still interact with these objects at 10% increased speed. Survivors may also manually remove the freeze-frame effect. Decoding progress is freeze-framed onto the optical slide for 20 seconds, and all decoding progress made during the freeze-frame is instantly applied when it ends. Elimination progress is freeze-framed onto the optical slide for 5 seconds, and all elimination progress made during the freeze-frame is instantly applied when it ends. Exit gate decoding progress is freeze-framed onto the optical slide for 20 seconds, and all decoding progress made during the freeze frame is instantly applied when it ends. This is where we get to see the less hands-on use cases for Lanternist's kit. This is also where we understand how she can be used as a pseudo-decoder. If she freezes a cipher, it gets a 10% increase to its decoding speed. What makes this even more cool is that when you have a cipher frozen, it won't shake at all, letting you or a teammate also decode very sneakily. The interesting and quite strong interaction you can do while freezing a cipher is actually when it's nearly done though. If you freeze a cipher and decode until it reaches 100%, you have a perfectly primed cipher machine ready to pop. But the great part about this is you're able to actually fully leave this cipher, go to a gate, and as long as the freeze duration of 20 seconds is still active, you can pop the cipher when you are nowhere near it. The other and very important use case is using it on chaired teammates. Using it this way can delay the chair progress to stop your teammate from getting to second stage. You can also freeze gates, and while this doesn't have an insane use case, the most practical one is simply using it for the increased 10% speed that you get. Amanda's last and more minor ability is Optical Illusion. When dropping a pallet, the Lanternist uses her projection lantern to confuse the hunter. The pallet cannot be destroyed for 1 second. If the Lanternist is in a disembodied state, the effect lasts for 1.5 seconds. And this can only trigger once every 10 seconds. This honestly isn't as insane as I think people expect it to be. Yes, of course, denying the hunter that pallet break can help you make some insane distance. Not only is it shorter than a pallet stun, but also in this era of IDV, there are tons of hunters that are able to either benefit off of pallet mind games more, or even completely disregard pallets in general. So while this can be really good, especially in its moments, and also since it's much safer than trying to get that pallet stun, it's not going to feel super impactful in your games, and you most definitely should not look to play around it over having your other 2 main abilities. Now that we've gone over Lanternist's kit, let's talk about some builds and playstyles. I'm going to do this section a bit differently to how I normally do it. First, I want to identify good traits to pick and then give you all a good starter build. First and foremost, Flywheel is a must bring on her. It's too strong and synergizes way too well with her kit to not bring it. Out of the last 3 final traits, I think the least viable is Knee-Jerk Reflex. It's not at all bad, but you'll end up getting more value if you just run Borrowed Time. And Tide is only really necessary if you're planning on being a rescuer. Looking at the rest of your minor traits, Exit Path is as always mandatory. If you're running more of a kiter/backup kiter role, getting traits such as Defense Mechanism and Muscle Memory can be good to help your kite. If you want to be more hands-on assist heavy, Mutual Support and Telepathy are solid options as you know where teammates are positioned, and obviously if you're running Rescuer, Symbiotic Effect is very useful. Risky Move is also great, along with Birdcage Effect, which you'll naturally get building down into Tide Turner. Now for an actual build. Amanda very commonly can fit into builds that are predetermined to be meta. You'll likely be able to get the perfect value out of just running your standard persona webs for each role. For a specific example though, we can actually turn to the recommended builds that the game actually gives us. This build here is given to us by the game as a default and is actually pretty much exactly what I would recommend. Your final traits are Best in Slot, bringing Defense Mechanism and Muscle Memory are good as we already determined, and obviously we have Exit Path and some extra assist potential with Telepathy. The only thing I'd personally do to this web is getting rid of Companion Effect and instead putting the points into Defense Mechanism. Companion Effect isn't bad, especially not for Amanda, but your role with this build in particular isn't to be the rescuer. You can certainly use abilities to provide assisting to your main rescuer, but you're not supposed to be the main rescuer. Does this mean you shouldn't rescue? No, it just means you're the next best option if the main rescuer can't. So, unless you're playing with a rescuer who either doesn't have the best or luckiest positioning, I would recommend sacrificing Companion Effect and in turn getting better personal kite potential. The most important thing to note with all of Amanda's different playstyles is that you shouldn't ignore a part of your kit just because it's not centered around this specific playstyle. For example, if you're running Rescue Amanda, you shouldn't just stop assisting with your freezes. You'd end up wasting a huge part of her potential. If you're playing her as an assist, you should still practice being good at her personal kite just in case you're the one who takes it. If you're playing a pseudo decoder, that doesn't justify not going in for a save if you need to. You still have strong utilities in your kit to keep your overall playstyle very broad, even if your persona web might seem to lock you into a specific role. This is why I'm honestly finding it difficult to write out how you should be playing each playstyle for her, because honestly, if you want to play her right and get the most value out of playing her, all your different playstyles should look pretty similar. Each one just has a different primary focus. If you're trying to play as more of a kite-heavy playstyle, fishing for first kite is your go-to, but you don't want to do that with the other three. If you're playing assist, figuring out where your team is, who the hunter is, and who might get chased first is what you want to do. With decoder, your primary focus is hiding, trying to sneakily rush ciphers and maybe even assisting your main decoder to make them faster. With rescue, you get to play more brave. Do objectives, but stay close enough to the person kiting so that you aren't halfway across the map when they get chaired. All the different playstyles might have different focuses, but you have to be using your kit to the fullest to get proper value. Assist teammates when you can, take kite if you need to, and even save when the match depends on it. Biggest thing to note is that Amanda is strong. This isn't a weak character, and even if your persona web has you suited for a specific playstyle, your kit still lets you excel at pretty much everything else too. To end off this guide, I thought I'd share my personal thoughts on Lanternist, where I think she fits in the meta right now, and her overall power level. In general, this character is very strong, but I don't think she's at all OP. People seem to be overlooking the holes in her kit because of how strong she can be into a handful of characters. For example, yes, she's good into chip damage hunters, but almost all of the meta hunter picks aren't going to suffer all that much into her because they don't have damage focused around abilities, but instead normal attacks. Additionally, most meta hunters right now don't have that much, if any, crowd control or stun effects, meaning her freezes are only really useful on herself since she can bait hits by moving her static image. Again, does that make her bad? Absolutely not. She's still 100% a viable pick against most hunters, but I don't think she's broken like a lot of people seem to be assuming. I'd personally probably put her in high A tier, bordering on S. I think the only reason I don't have her in S is unfortunately due to how meta-oriented this game really is. The truth is, you don't end up seeing a lot of the hunters that get hard countered by her very often anyways, but you do see a lot of the more meta hunter picks, and she just isn't designed to be a meta stomper. That is all for this guide. If you liked it or it helped you out, I would appreciate if you could like this video. YouTube has this newer feature on smaller channels like mine called hyping. According to YouTube, it's a system that lets you guys hype up my videos and climb a little leaderboard and hopefully get shown off to more people. That being said, if you see anything below this video that lets you hype it, I would be very thankful if you could. These guides take so much longer to make than my normal videos, so I would greatly appreciate if you could give this video a like and maybe even subscribe to my channel. It's free, takes less than 5 seconds, and you can always unsubscribe later. Thank you so much for watching this video, good luck mastering Lanternist, and I will see you in the next video.